Hello and welcome to Gallery Watch. I'm Nadia Hunter and today we are here for a very special preview of the exhibition entitled Treasure Ships at the Art Gallery of Western Australia. With over 250 pieces on display, some of which have been rarely seen, I highly recommend coming down to take a look.
So this exhibition, while it explores the kind of interaction between Europe and Asia, it also explores the kind of foundations of the exploration of Australia. And one of the more intriguing objects among the many is actually this book by Francisco Pelsart, which portrays the wreck of the Batavia and the activities that took place afterwards, as many of you may know, surely living in Western Australia. But what's fascinating about this is actually the first depiction of Australia in a book that we know of. And so it's quite intriguing and fascinating that the first image of Australia.
And what's the date of this book?
1647, it was printed.
Wow.
And if you read through it, it portrays the whole incident of the wreck of the Batavia. So quite relevant, I think, to Western Australian audiences and to the show as well. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on to Gallery Watch. And how much effort went into this exhibition? I mean, there's over 250 artefacts here. So.
It's been about a 5-year journey for both myself and the co-curator James Bennett at the Art Gallery of South Australia. And it's been, a great pleasure. One of our great luxuries in life is that we get to go around the world and find these fantastic objects to put into shows of this scale and complexity. So it's been a great pleasure of ours. It's taken a lot of work, and we've had some great collaborators, such as the Art Gallery of Western Australia, but it's been a great effort, and I think that this show really portrays the kind of what we think of as our globalized age, the actual formation of the globalized age that we live in today, and the connections with Asia, that they are not new but enduring, but different. They manifest themselves in different ways.
And so it was inspired by the silk route trade along with many other things?
It really came out of a previous exhibition at the Art Gallery of South Australia, Golden Journey, Japanese art from Australian collections. And what that exhibition really portrayed was, or a small section of it, was the interaction between the Portuguese and the Dutch in Japan. And from that grew a real interest to show this story of this amazing cultural interaction that developed because of the interest in spices in Europe, which obviously fostered this maritime exploration throughout the rest of the world. And so it really developed out of that and has kind of grown into this amazing exhibition, which really this story has not been shown in Australia before. This is really the first time. So we feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to present it to both Adelaide and Perth audiences.
And can you tell me about some of the more special pieces that you have here, that you had a little heartbeat, nervous as you were sending it off to be displayed?
There's many objects in this exhibition that if you asked me in every room, I'd say that, I love this object more than any other, and then we go into the next room and I'm sure I'd find one that I love more than that one. But there's one in particular. It's the only national treasure in the exhibition. It comes from Portugal. And it's a gold and silver gilt salver.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular.
It's amazing.
And what it portrays really, it's beautiful just in and of itself as an object. But what it portrays, it was created in the early 16th century. It really portrays the wealth that was brought because of these spices coming back to Lisbon, and the amazing kind of opulence of the age in the 16th century.
Hi Lynn, thanks for joining us. Can you tell me a little bit about why you're very excited about this exhibition?
First of all, it's the most beautiful exhibition. You come in and it's just awe-inspiring, breathtaking. The beauty of the paintings, of the other objects, but my extra interest is that it tells so much of the history of our area, and it really gives you the feeling not only for the beauty of the art, but the science involved in all of it. I'm a scientist by training, and to see the first depictions of some of the species that have never been seen in the West before, It's just amazing to understand the changes in technology that allowed all this to happen as we learnt navigation, as we built better ships, and again, the interactions with different cultures. So we learnt more. We shared algebra. We shared other things about astronomy across the world. So for me, it's inspiring on lots of levels.
And did you recently do some travelling?
I did. I did almost the precursor to this exhibition because I've been travelling along the Silk Road. So 5,000 camels were doing what these treasure ships took over and did in a more inclusive way, covering more areas, getting even better interactions between East and West. But to see the similarities between the two, to build it together, to look at the history really of what's happened over the last 1,000 years, that's just a great privilege for me.
It makes this exhibition, I guess, so much more relevant to you because you've actually experienced some of the areas.
Absolutely. And imagine deserts, almost the driest in the world, some drier than Australia. But now the ships were taking over, and to see that transition happening, to see how as the communications increased, how we could ensure faster transport, for example, safer, I hope, as well, because it was pretty dangerous going along the Silk Road. You were crossing deserts, you had pirates just the way you would on the oceans. So many angles to all of this. But to have a collection here, which is so inclusive, the number of objects is just extraordinary. I've heard it described as the best exhibition in Australia this year. Well, gosh, things would have to be very good to beat it, because this is absolutely superb.
Oh, thank you very much, Lynn.
My pleasure.
Tony, thank you for joining us on Gallery Watch. Your particular interest is in ceramics. Can you tell me why these ones here are so special?
Well, there's another interest actually. Ceramics is one, and we've got here at least a couple of pieces from the source of porcelain, basically, Jingdezhen. And so you'll see throughout the exhibition, you'll see porcelain pieces that are either from Jingdezhen or they have been picked up later by the Western world. And we've got, in this instance, this is what attracts me to this particular piece, is the fact it also has a ship on board. And if you look at the ship, you'll find that a lot of this exhibition is mentioning these ships that were the ships that plied the trade routes. I mean, the whole exhibition basically is about the treasure ships. But from the porcelain point of view, it's just fascinating that they were streets ahead of us. They dug this porcelain clay up, and it took us years to find out about porcelain in the West. So the concept, as Stefano mentioned earlier, that the East and this part of the world was, a little bit behind us. That's rubbish in many cases, because there are streets ahead of us in porcelain. For years we tried to imitate it by putting stoneware, white glaze, and then the blue on top, and we called it Delft, and that takes us to the VOC. These treasure ships are just incredible in that there is in the catalogue a comment, and it's actually facts and figures, that when, I think it was Walter Raleigh, who was privateering, managed to grab one of the Portuguese ships, and he took that back. The value of the cargo was equal to half the value of the British treasury at the time. Now, the Portuguese were the ones who really did all the hard work with the spice trade.
I was just about to say, because of the fact that in the West we couldn't replicate this china, I expect that it made it incredibly sought after.
Very much so. And you had, at one stage, you had the Dutch sending patterns to China and saying, can you make us some of these designs, they were sent back. The designs were Western designs sent back to Holland, for example. Things like tulip vases, where you had them made to order in China, and that sort of rings a bell. I mean, we've come complete circle, but it's just fascinating, and the whole exhibition is a challenge for guides. We've got the voluntary gallery guides who will be doing public tours and to school groups and what have you. But as I was saying earlier, periodically guides say, well, we've had enough, we'll retire, and then they come out with an exhibition like this. And you say, well, hell, we can't retire. We've got to hang in for a while. But it's just amazing that some of these pieces have survived, because many of the pieces were dug up from wrecks. And
what are the dates that we're looking at?
well, in this case, I'm not sure of the exact dates of these. I mean, but we're looking, it's probably 1600s or something, I don't know.
1620.
1620, it's close anyhow. But the dates, I used to say, with dates, I'd add all the figures up and then take them off a final mark if anybody gave me an essay with dates in it. But it's very difficult to put them in relation to one another, because you'll see a piece that is 1600s and then you'll see another piece that is 1800s, looks identical. And dating these is very difficult anyhow.
Well, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Gallery Watch in just a moment. Welcome back to Gallery Watch, where we are at the exhibition entitled Treasure Ships at the Art Gallery of Western Australia. Thank you for joining us, John. And can you let me know, how important is this exhibition in particular to the Art Gallery?
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful exhibition that has a real diversity of works in it, which are really historical and some of them very old. It's a result of a collaboration between the Art Gallery of South Australia and the Art Gallery of Western Australia, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Western Australians and visitors to the state to come and see some really interesting art, but also really important aspects of history that occurred in the Indian Ocean through the trade with the Dutch East India Company in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries, and not far off the coast of Western Australia.
And do you think this will create more passion for art gallery goers?
I think it very much adds to the wonderful diversity of what's offered here at the Western Australian Art Gallery. Of course, we've got everything ranging from very old works, some of which are here now, to very contemporary works, and this is a wonderful exhibition in its own right, so I do encourage people to come and have a look at it while they've got the opportunity.
Stefano, thank you very much for joining us on Gallery Watch, and congratulations. What a fantastic exhibition.
Yes, it's a good feeling actually when all this comes together and a major exhibition is installed. Now it takes a long time and it takes a lot of efforts on part of the entire team, and in this case the team is not only the Art Gallery of Western Australia's team, but it's also the Art Gallery of South Australia team. So it's really a wonderful collaboration. I'm very proud of what we have been able to achieve as a team.
And the scale of this exhibition, is this something that you're used to, or?
Well, in a way, I'm used to it from my time. Now, I've been at the Art Gallery of Western Australia as the director here for now 7 years, but my former life is that of a curator of Islamic art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and so I have put together exhibitions of this scale before, and it's always been an exciting journey. I'm very well aware of the complexities as a curator and organizer, and actually this exhibition is particularly interesting to me because when I was working in the field of Islamic art as a curator, I've organized in the past exhibitions that talk about these cultural, very global outreach that through economic and trade and commerce means actually moves into a cultural exchange, cultural and artistic exchange evolved. So one of the major exhibitions I did when I was at the Met is on Venice and the Islamic world, and it's in a way this is an equivalent show that in a different time, in a different location, looks at the Indian Ocean and all the countries that are affected by the trade after the European powers managed to find their way into the Indian Ocean, the Portuguese and the Dutch, and the British, of course, afterwards. So it offers so many different threads, but within this kind of global trade, global exchange that I really love about.
It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
And some of these pieces here are quite dear to your heart. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
Well, in this relatively small area, there is the relationship of the Portuguese with Christian art brought to the new areas of Goa, of Western India. And so all the works that you see around here are actually the product of Indian craftsmen who, or mixed, of course, with Portuguese or European craftsmen who were producing works that obviously weren't done at an earlier stage in India because Christianity was brought by the missionaries, the Jesuits, at this time when the Portuguese controlled Goa and the ports of Goa.
So is this around the 16th century?
Yes, we are 16th, 17th century, and one of the head of Christ that you see here is one of the most moving images, I think. You have to think that it was part of a larger statue that was life-size, if you see the size of the head, beautifully carved, and it's a wonderful testimony of the way churches were actually decorated in Goa and in the areas of West India.
So it's not just about the spice route as such, it's also about how religion influenced the art of the time.
Yes, the spice route, of course, was the economic value of doing this, and a little bit like when you think, the Spanish and the Portuguese being in South America, and gold was the currency really and what they wanted from it. From the Indian Ocean trade, they want spices because they were incredibly expensive, and it was a new thing in Europe, and it was used both for food but also for medicinal purposes. So it was very, very valuable at the time. But of course, the missionary zeal of the Christian Europeans in particular was always at the forefront, and so there was also a very strong input in converting these barbarians who didn't believe in Christianity. So.
Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy opening night tonight.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So we're in front of some 18th century dresses here. Can you tell me a little bit more about the history of these?
Well, what's so interesting about the textiles here, I think particularly the European objects at either end of the plinth, are that they show in a very lovely way the transfer of interest in designs from Asia and from the East into the European market. So the exhibition has a lot of examples of porcelain and other wares that have been traded, but with the textiles we actually get this to see the translation of particularly design motifs into particular materials. But what I also love so much about these items is that they're objects that were actually worn by people, so it gives us a very direct connection to the past. You get a sense of the scale of the person who actually wore the items. You get a real sense of that lived history, if you like, of the past. And so I think they really work very well to bring us closer together in a sense.
And what sort of origin is this particular piece here?
Okay, so what's interesting about this piece is that it picks up on the 18th century interest in the natural world and the floral. So you can see the little bouquet images of the roses and the floral items. But the use of that lattice work and the arabesque is also...
It's Italian, actually. That's what it reminds me of.
It is, but it's also a reference back to an awareness particularly of the arabesque is a reference back to Islamic design in part, but it also refers back to Japanese designs and designs from Southeast Asia. So it is in fact a real blend of many influences into something that we look at and think of actually as kind of embodying the 18th century in Europe to us. So it just again adds to that sense of, that bringing together of so many different influences into a whole.
And also the coat down the end there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, that's a fabulous item as well. That's actually a dressing gown that belonged to King George IV of England. If you look at it, you can see that it's clearly been worn regularly. It's fading and showing some signs of wear. And again, it's that fabulous connection into a real person from history that we can see here. But also it's made from Japanese silk, and there's a connection there between the Dutch traders in Japan actually bringing the silks back as gifts to important clients. So again, you get that real sense of materials traversing the globe, being sourced in one area and then actually making their journey across the seas back to Europe and then forming a different kind of political and economic function back in Europe.
I find it absolutely fascinating, and also that they have been preserved so well.
They have indeed, and that's one of the interesting aspects. The dressing gown actually belongs to the collection of the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, so it's a kind of interesting thought too, that once the fabrics had left Japan and made their way to Europe, that they then find themselves back in a different British colony and now on display in Perth.
What a fantastic exhibition at the Art Gallery of WA. I'm Nadia Hunter. See you next time on Gallery Watch.